If you're coming to the DCS F-4E from a more modern jet, then you've probably noticed that it's a little more task-heavy than something like a F-16. And one area that can be confusing is using the Sparrows, so I wanted to make a quick tutorial to help you through this. Let's get started. For this tutorial, we'll be sticking to front seat procedures only to keep the video short. There are two ways you can utilize the AIM-7. One is for beyond visual range fights, and the other is made for within visual range combat. But with the short range of Vietnam-era Sparrows, you're most likely going to want to see the enemy if you want a good probability of kill. In any case, you'll need to do a tune-up of missiles prior to launch. Don't worry, this part is easy. Just flip this switch up and wait for these lights to turn on. You'll get one for each missile that's ready. As with any fighter jet, you'll need the master arm in the on position, which you'll see reflected on this head-up display indicator. And yes, that's the actual name of that set of lights. There are 3 other lights on the HUD indicator we'll be using, and you flip through them along with their associated modes using the pinky switch. As I'm flipping through the pinky switch modes, you'll see the different lights turn on. We want radar to launch Sparrows at BVR targets. Once that's all set, we're ready to find targets. Now if you're flying with Jester as your backseater, then you'll use the context action button, which by default is the V key. When you have several targets on the screen like this, you can tell Jester to move between them with a quick tap of the context button. When you focus the one you'd like to target, press and hold the context button to get Jester to lock it. At any time, you can tell Jester to drop the lock with the double press of the context button. With the target locked, you'll get a screen that looks like this, so let's talk about what all the symbology means. This number on the left is the radar range scale. In other words, we can see 25 miles of airspace on this setting. This number on the right changes depending on what position the aspect knob is set to in the backseat. So it can show closure velocity, altitude of the target, target aspect, or target heading. In this case, it's closure velocity. The big circle is your allowable steering error. This is a way of showing how far the target can be off the center line of your aircraft and still have a valid shot. You use it by maneuvering until this dot is inside the ASE circle. You'll also see these 2 horizontal lines following your locked target around. These are the range strobes, and they represent 2 ranges known as Rmax and Rmax2. Rmax is the farther of the 2 strobes, and it's the maximum range of the missile if the target continues flying on the same heading and course. Rmax2 is the maximum range if the target makes a high G turn to fly directly away from you. It is not the minimum range of the missile. There's also a range indicator running along the right side of the optical sight reticle. In either case, you want to make sure the target is under at least one of the radar strobes. When a target is in range, this in-range light will illuminate. Once that target is in range and inside the ASE circle, you'll see these chute lamps activate and you can use the trigger to launch a Sparrow. Remember, it's the trigger in the F4 and not the pickle button. Without all those conditions met, the F4's interlocks won't allow you to shoot. However, you can flip this switch to out and a Sparrow will launch even outside of parameters. After you achieve lock-on, you will hear Jester do a 4-second countdown. That's because the missile needs to do its own internal work for a good track. This is for the E model Sparrow. The F only needs 2 seconds, and according to the manual, you can shave off 2 more seconds by switching on the master arm switch after a lock-on. Once you launch a missile, the bottom strobe will start moving up toward the target. This is your countdown timer. It will reach the target at the same time the computer predicts the missile should reach the target. Treat it as an educated guess. Every time you launch a Sparrow, one of these blue lights will deactivate. You can use them to track your progress. As a side note, if you ever find that you can't launch your final 2 Sparrows, it most likely means that you have a centerline drop tank. The centerline drop tank interferes with the launch of the forward 2 Sparrows and has to be jettisoned before you can use them. Now let's talk about using Sparrows in within visual range combat. For this part, keep in mind that these features were added on later in development and involve some workarounds that can be confusing. This mode was added so pilots had a quick way to set up the jet for a fight if they were in the middle of another task, like air-to-ground work. To get the radar to search for a target directly in front of the aircraft, press the cage button. This points the radar in the optical sight reticle directly ahead of the jet, but this won't automatically find a target. For that, we need to activate Computer Automatic Acquisition Mode, or CAA, and we do that by pressing the nose gear steering button. Now this next part can be confusing to some people. In CAA, you use the pinky switch for steering the radar antenna prior to lock-on. What that means is that the pinky switch no longer functions as a weapon selector. Instead, it moves the antenna left and right like this. In the gun's position, the radar sweeps up and down inside the corridor to the left of the nose. The radar position sweeps the right, and the heat position sweeps the middle. In the heat position, you'll hear the growl of the Sidewinder, which can be misleading. If you didn't know this was going on, it could lead to a situation where you see an enemy fighter in front of you, but your scan is off to the right because you mistakenly think that's where the switch needs to be for a radar-guided missile. The radar will automatically lock a target in CAA. If you get a lock on the wrong target, you can press the nose gear steering button to have it start its search again. Afterwards, you can exit CAA by putting the weapon select knob on B, which is located at the bottom of this knob where it's hard to see. Remember what I said about confusing workarounds? This is one of those. Let's do a quick demo to see how all this works out in practice. Here we have a hostile MiG in front of us, so we begin by pressing the cage button. Now this doesn't give us a lock. For that, we need to put the radar into CAA mode, and we do that by pressing the nose gear steering button. Now that we're in CAA, we need to steer the radar with the pinky switch. So I'm going to place it into heat to point the radar straight ahead. The radar has acquired a lock, and we have in-range and shoot cues. Now the pinky switch is a weapon selector again. So I'm going to place it back into radar and launch a Sparrow. And there's our splash. One final thing I want to mention is that older Sparrows have a very short effective range. Using them at their theoretical maximum range gives you a very low probability of a kill. They tend to not see radar illumination from targets that are far away and can easily go dumb, so I recommend using them fairly close. As you can see, this is all pretty confusing, so I hope this video was helpful in cutting through that confusion, and as always, thanks for watching.